Hey, everybody checking out the Mike and JD Show YouTube channel. Thank you for watching this video. If you could do me a huge favor and hit that like button, make sure you're a subscriber, and also comment on this video and help us defeat the algorithm. I would greatly appreciate it. And while you're at it, if you like this video, head over to patreon.com/the Mike and JD Show and become a Patreon subscriber today, where you will get this audio immediately as soon as it's done recorded, way ahead of everybody else. And then, of course, it will be ad free. Thank you very much. Now enjoy the video. Hey, now it's Brace for Impact, and I'm your host, Mike Gilbert, and I'm going solo on that ass, but it's still the same. We're talking Impact Wrestling's Impact 1000, man, 1000 episodes. That is whenever I was watching NWA TNA in the early days. This was before Impact was even a show. I didn't think the company would last that long, and honestly, nobody did. Nobody thought that the company would last 20 years, and here we are, 21 years. And then when Impact started as a show, in the early days, some of you guys might remember, or some of you might be too young to even remember, but it actually started as a show. It was on Fox Sports Network, and Fox Sports Network was like a collection of these regional sports networks. So if you're like a fan of a specific team or a specific region, that Fox Sports would be dedicated to that region. So like right now, I watch 49ers news and stuff like that, and on NBC Sports Bay Area. So that would have been different than the NBC Sports Network, which has the same feed that goes out across the country. So Fox Sports Net, which I think now is called Bally Sports, it's owned by Sinclair. Not every region had it, but a lot of regions did have it. It was different than FS1, which is the same stream that you get everywhere else. So you would get it in all these different regions, and they would try to get it at the same time in all the different regions, but it was really specific on what time that region wanted the show. So when I started watching it, I was actually in tech school for the Air Force, so technical school. So it's like right after you get out of basic training, they send you to like another school where you're kind of learning a specific trade or a job. And at the time, I was supposed to be a cop. Turns out Mike Gilbert was never meant to be a cop. So I, I that was my original job. That was the job that was essentially chosen for me. And while I was there, I ended up dislocating my shoulder and having to have surgery. And because of that, I ended up working for the base chapel, the head chaplain for the base. And he had like a coffee shop where he would bring in where students and other folks and young airmen could come in there, relax. They could drink coffee. They could play video games. We had pool tables. We had foosball tables. So I was the guy that managed that coffee shop on the base. This was at in San Antonio, Texas, at Lackland Air Force Base, and that was about the same time that Impact was created, and it was when we got it on Fox Sports Net. I think it was a San Antonio specific Fox Sports Net because it was always talking about the San Antonio Spurs. And so I was watching it there, but it would come on at like 1 in the afternoon on a Friday. And talk about a terrible time slot. I think that's what it came on in Texas. And I don't know what time it came on for everybody else, but I think it was like typically like 2, 3 in the afternoon, depending on if it was on the West Coast. It might have been actually like noon on a Friday. So when everybody's still at work and kids are still in school, people, Fox Sports Net was showing Impact Wrestling, and I believe Dixie Carter and the Carter family were actually paying for that time slot. They were just trying to get on TV. Sorry, still got coffee for the working man. So I believe they were just trying to get themselves on the TV. And so that's how it was created, because before that they were doing the weekly pay-per-view model. And that turned out to be kind of an abysmal financial failure. And it just was unsustainable to go every single week on pay-per-view. And so your money was then fluctuating up and down every single week. And so the Panda Energy and Dixie decided, when they bought the company, to move off of that, which I think a lot of people in the industry were telling them from the beginning it was doomed for failure. But the Jarretts, that was the only way they could get on TV, and they couldn't afford to buy a time slot. So when they sold to Panda, Panda had that kind of money, so they ended up pulling it off of pay-per-view, and they bought the time slot on Fox Sports Net, and the rest, as they say, is history. But I was, just thinking back on, the different eras and the highs and lows of Impact. So they start on Fox Sports Net in a Friday afternoon show at a time where literally nobody could watch except for extremely old people and kids who were being homeschooled, or someone like me that just worked at a coffee shop and we had the TV and I could watch it there. So I literally watched it every Friday, and I was a big fan of the show. I was a big fan of the Fox box too. Like I thought that was cool, and that's something that, like, I'm never like a guy that said, "Hey, we should go back to," and then say something that we did 20 years ago. But I thought the Fox box was cool, and if I just enjoyed it. And if they did something like that, or if they ever moved to a sports network, I think that's something that would be kind of cool to bring back. Oh, excuse me. But I was thinking of all the different eras. So it starts there, right? And then 2005, they end up moving over to Spike TV because WWE was on Spike. The contract runs out. WWE moves back to USA Network, and they've been on USA ever since. And so, but Spike is a smaller channel. Right now it's called Paramount, the Paramount Network. Back then it was called Spike. It was kind of more of a smaller mid-tier channel. And when they had WWF or WWE, that kind of propelled them into that like top 10 channel. But without WWF, they're like a bottom 25, right? And so they felt compelled to bring back pro wrestling whenever they lost WWF. So they went to the number 2 promotion. Little did they know the number 2 promotion was number 2 by a very, very large gap. Like they were not close, because as you remember, like there's only a couple thousand people watching them on pay-per-view every week. And then when they went to Fox Sports Net, yeah, there's a couple 100,000 people, but it's people like transient folks and people in bars and people, they really didn't get a wide audience, and plus they were paying for the time slot, so the gap was huge. But they did feel the need to go ahead and bring in pro wrestling. And I think people need to understand that, right now we got this rumor going around that Fox is not really interested, Fox Network, Big Fox, in paying WWE $300 million a year for SmackDown. And so people think that maybe that would open up the doors for Impact. I don't think that's what that means. I think that they, Fox Network, because they have so many hits already, they don't really need to bring in a smaller promotion to fill that gap on Friday night. So I don't think it would open up the doors for AEW or Impact or anybody else. So, but with Spike TV, that was such a big part of what they were doing, and they were really heavy into that male 18 to 34 demographic. That's what the network was built on. They still had UFC at this point, and so they wanted to bring in another wrestling product because wrestling was big among the 18 to 34 male demographic. And so they took a flyer on Impact, and they actually put them on Saturday night at like 11 p.m. And I remember this because I was in Japan at this time, and we had a cable service on the base that would get American channels, but you would get everything a week later. So it's like so it was so weird. So we were paying for this cable, so we would get the American Forces Network, which was at the time like 4 to 6 channels, and those 4 to 6 channels you would get like all the top sports. You would get WWE pay-per-views, you would get UFC pay-per-views, you would get it all for all with your service. So it was all in there, and it was the American Forces Network without the cable service was free. But then if you paid the extra fee, you would get American cable networks, and you would get their feed a week late, and it would be in like the like so say like because the time difference was so different, like I think it was like 60 we were 16 hours ahead. So if I wanted to watch something that happened in the States on a Saturday night, I had to wait the following week to get it at that same time that it would have been on had I been in the States, if that makes sense. So we had that, but what we also had was Star Asia. Now Star Asia was the biggest uh, English sports network throughout the Asia Pacific. So it went through China, it went through Japan, all that. Well, Impact was on that. So I got to watch it earlier on. I got to watch it like in a better time zone, or a better time for me, Star Asia, in a more timely fashion. I didn't really have the downloading capability that I have now. But if I missed it during that time because I didn't have DVR, I would have to wait a week, and I would watch it on the Spike channel a week after it had already aired. That way I could watch it at 11 p.m. in a normal time slot for me. So that's how I used to watch Impact. So it went to Spike, and it was Saturday night at 11 p.m. And then I think they ended up moving. They did a primetime teaser. They did really good numbers on that late time slot. I think that's when they brought in Team 3D at the same time. And I think by 2006 they had moved to prime time. They started off 1 hour, and then they got to 2 hours, and then they were hitting the ground running on Spike, and they had a lot of good years on Spike. And I know it ended pretty and pretty crazy fashion there in the Spike years. And I know people point to blame at Vince Russo, and he is very much to blame. But Dixie Carter is the one that ruined that relationship ultimately, because she was a dishonest person. And she kept Vince Russo on when they didn't know about it, and Vince kind of snitched on himself a little bit by telling Mike Johnson through an email he was trying to send to Mike today. He sent it to Mike Johnson. Mike Johnson then reported that even though Spike had told Dixie that they did not want Vince Russo attached to the network, that he was still working there, and so that whole debacle happened. But I think they were just done with. I think they were just done with pro wrestling, and they haven't brought wrestling back since then. So, and I think that's telling. So we have that Spike TV goes away, or Impact on Spike goes away, and then it moves over to a network called Destination America. And when they got that channel, I had never heard of Destination America, but it's actually a much bigger channel than AXS TV. It's just because it's attached to Discovery. So if you have cable and you get the Discovery Channel, and you have an upper tier package, you're gonna get Destination America too. So it was on that, and of course Dixie ruined that. She sent out another company-wide email blasting the network. They got a hold of it. They were done within a year there, and then they moved over to Pop TV after that, and they had a lot of good years on Pop TV, but they weren't making any money off of that deal. And I think I remember an article that had come out, and I was trying to find it, but I couldn't find it. So this is just based off of memory. That it was basically like a barter deal with the company, which basically they were splitting ad revenue essentially. So they were just doing an ad revenue split, and they had like a small production fee, and I think it was like $1 million. So they were not making any money off of that Pop TV deal. And so that's when all the cost cutting started to go down. Like some of it happened during the Destination America era, but it really happened during the Pop TV, and they did a lot of the cost cutting, but they couldn't they couldn't sustain at that level, and that's ultimately what did the Dixie Panda Energy era owned era of Impact was. They just weren't getting any money for TV rights. They had destroyed their cable, not cable, their pay-per-view revenue. Live events were dead. They couldn't do anything with live events, because they had always been giving away tickets for free there in Orlando. And so they just really never had a way domestically to make money. And domestically is where you make your biggest money, and you make your biggest money off of TV rights deals. and they just had no TV rights deals. So they were still trying to produce. Again, Pop TV is a pretty big network. They were still trying to produce a high quality TV show, but they had cut costs dramatically, and they couldn't. They had some good talent, but production wise, they started to go down the tubes. And talent wise, they were on these smaller contracts. They were losing talent at a higher rate. They were burning through the contracts. They weren't paying people. Yada yada. You guys remember? Billy Corgan came in and he tried to take over. They ended up selling to Anthem. Anthem basically like bottomed out their production costs and the production overhead and the talent overhead. If you remember when Anthem came in, and this was still in the Pop TV era, like they just started cutting contracts left and right. Like Bobby Lashley's gone, Drew McIntyre's gone, EC3's gone. Just one after another of these high-end contracts. They start cutting and cutting and cutting, and they ended up making a deal with Lucha Underground to be able to bring in some of their talent and put them on a per night deal. So that's where you started to see the Lucha Brothers and Taya Valkyrie, Brian Cage. They ended up pushing him to world champion. So the Anthem era starts at the end of the Pop TV era. And we used to complain. So that was in 2018, and I started, or they came in 2017. Sorry, but they're still on Pop TV, and Anthem and Jarrett, they have their deal that blows up in their face. They bring in Scott D'Amore and Don Callis. Then bigger cuts start happening. They start to balance the overhead. They start to balance the checkbook a little bit. They I don't want to say they lost the Pop TV deal. I think both companies were ready to move on because Anthem had these big dreams. So by the end of 2018, they're off of Pop TV and they go to a little hunting network. Not even like the outdoor sports network or the hunting channel. They go to a small hunting channel called Pursuit that they have an ownership stake in. And they end up going there in January of 2019. And at the same time, they're airing live on Twitch for free. And I, like most of America, did not get the Pursuit channel. So I was trying to watch every Friday night on Twitch. I learned what Twitch was by hearing that Impact was going there. So I only created a Twitch account for Impact. And when Impact went off of Twitch, I deleted my account. So I was watching Friday night on Twitch, and I liked the Twitch era. Like, I don't want to say the Pursuit era because more people watched on Twitch than they watched on Pursuit, honestly. And so the Twitch era was fun, but they went that way because their goal and their plan was to buy a network. They did try to get Tony Khan to buy into the company because Tony Khan had to deal with TNT TNT, TBS. That never really worked out. But they were trying to get their show on AXS TV, and when they could not get the show on AXS TV, they started to have the conversations with Mark Cuban, and they ended up buying AXS TV in 2019. And next thing you know, in I believe in October, the week after Bound for Glory, they debuted on AXS TV, and now, as you could say, the rest is history. So they have really survived a lot of downfalls, a lot of peaks and valleys in this company. And I would say right now, starting at the beginning of the summer, they're on another peak.